few people couldn't join us live, and so we'll send them the link later. Welcome, everybody. First of all, I'm Teresa Ferguson. I'm the Executive Director of AustinUP. And AustinUP is a nonprofit community alliance that works on issues related to the future of aging in Austin. And employment for 50 plus professionals is one of those issues. We were formed in 2014 as a result of the Mayor's Task Force on Aging. So we're very proud to present these events. We usually hold them face to face along with our 50 plus job fairs, but that's not happening anytime soon. But I'm very excited to welcome back Victoria Musa Lyons. She spoke to our group, I guess it was a couple years ago, and she was very popular. And so we're very excited to have her again for this presentation, which is titled, Looking for a Job During a Pandemic, Am I Crazy? I guess you can all relate to that for sure. It is definitely a crazy time. So a little bit about Victoria. Over a career of 20 years, Victoria has become recognized in the industry for her ability to help companies navigate the challenges of growth and change in a globalized marketplace. Known for her people-centric approach, she blends analytics, practical insights, and business instincts to deliver solutions that yield top-performing teams and bottom-line results benefiting all stakeholders. So after holding senior-level roles at Texas Instruments, Dell, Monsanto, Victoria left the corporate world to start her own company, HR Matters Global. She did that in 2015. So Victoria, very excited to have you today. Take it away. Oh, one more thing as far as questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question directly during the presentation, or if you'd rather just write your question in the chat box, I can ask the question for you. But definitely we want this to be an interactive presentation. So, all right, Victoria, it's you.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. And I'm going to start by saying that what I'm going to talk about today, it is really an evolving way of going out and looking for a job. Even the last time I presented this, the pandemic hadn't happened. Interviewing over Zoom was a rare occurrence where it is now becoming the normal way. I'm working with companies today that are hiring people they've never met face to face. But that's also opened up a lot of things. For example, your job search now can get wider. You can go to different cities and different locations that maybe you would not have considered in the past, because where you sit and where you live today is not as important as it used to be. Companies don't have to consider relocation fees, the costs associated with relocating employees. You don't have to move today to work for or to get a job that you might have passed on in the past. So before I spend a lot of time talking, because this is so different, I've got my opinion around this and some things that I've seen be successful over the last 8 to 9 months as I've been working with companies, helping them recruit people via Zoom, or recruit employees that they haven't even seen, and helping people look for jobs and get jobs. I'd like to start by asking you, and that means you're either going to have to turn off your mic and ask me, or quickly text something in the chat box at the end of this, because at the end of this 45 minutes, what's the one thing, if you could say, I need to leave knowing this to be prepared for that upcoming interview, or to be prepared with how to find a job, I need to know that. What's that one thing? So I need questions. I'm asking right now for you to say, this is what I need. If not, I'll go into the canned presentation, but I'd rather this be two-way, and I'd rather this be beneficial to you.
So feel free to unmute yourself or just type it in the chat box, and I'll monitor. One thing that I heard, Victoria, is, one question is, how are Zoom interviews being done now? That was another question.
Okay, so Zoom interviews, what we're doing right now is a really good example of how Zoom interviews are being handled. So they're exactly like what we're doing right now, where so the initial screen, think about the old process. The initial screen would be, you would apply for a job. Normally someone would call you on the phone and they would do what I, as an HR professional, would call a screening call. And in that screening call, welcome back, Carmen. In that screening call, what they will interview for is, does this person have the basic requirements to do the job? And generally, that's not the person that's going to make the hiring decision. That's generally a recruiter, and they have a checklist. Does this person have the education required? Does this person actually have the experience that they need? Do they communicate in a way that's effective and can get to the point? They don't even interview for, have you actually done the job, but can you communicate? Are you personable? And then they check those boxes, right? That's the initial, and that's usually done on the phone. And there's a whole way of handling that as well. But then what will happen is, just like in the past, the face-to-face interview would be set up. And now it's a Zoom interview. So someone's going to reach out to you either via phone or email, and sometimes even text now, believe it or not, and start to schedule interview meetings with you via Zoom. Sometimes it might be 2 people and you being interviewed, or it may be one-on-one. The important thing to me, and to take away from preparing for a Zoom interview, there's a couple things to think about. One is the core things that would make you successful in a face-to-face interview still holds true even in a Zoom interview. For example, are you prepared? Like, do you have examples that you can talk to in a way that quickly demonstrates that you have experience around in doing the work that they're asking you about? Because that's usually what an interviewer is interviewing for. They're asking for you to demonstrate that you've done in the past what they're going to be asking you to do in the future. So your ability to craft the story, the message, still is the same. So you need to be able to say, here's how I've done it, and here's some examples of what the outcome was. Here are the people I've worked with. This is how I worked through it. Here's my thought process. This is how I solved the problem. That's exactly the same type of message that you would give. And I'm going to bring up some things so you can see it. The difference is that I have to move you around on my screen. But you still have to net out that message. You need to be able to tell your story. And so the best way to prepare for a Zoom meeting is first to prepare like you would for a face-to-face meeting. That's the first thing. What are the key messages that I want to communicate in that meeting? I want to communicate my ability to perform the job that they're interviewing for. I want to communicate my ability to work with others or be a member of a team. Whatever those key messages are, get the story down, because that stays the same. Your ability to write, for example, or communicate in writing, those core things are the same. The difference in Zoom is, now let's talk about how you prepare for Zoom. So the first thing you want to do is get real familiar with how to use Zoom. If you can, find out before the interview what technology they're going to ask you to use, because it may not always be Zoom. Some people use Google Meets. When I interview with people, when I just for my own personal meetings, I actually use Google Hangout. But the thing you want to do is you want to download and get familiar with whatever that app is. Most people seem to be using Zoom the most, but that doesn't mean that that's the app you are going to use. Every app that I can think of that I've had to use, it actually has a free, and I need to make sure I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see something on the screen? Okay. Almost every app that I can think of allows you to use at least some of it for free. Like Zoom will let you use 45 minutes. Google Hangout comes with my Gmail account. And so you want to download it and you want to practice it. You want to feel familiar with the app. You want to play around with the background application. Whatever it is, you want to get familiar with that. The next thing you want to do is you want to practice with a friend. You want to, because you got to get familiar. We're used to being able to play off people. And because I'm struggling right now too. I'm used to sitting across the room from someone and getting this when I talk, you know? And then I'm like, go, okay, lean into that. They're nodding, go the right way. And if they go, oh, pull back, right? That's not resonating. So you need to practice how to read those nonverbal cues over the Zoom or over your computer or your phone or whatever you're using. People will still send them to you, but they're a little more subtle and they're a little harder for us to pick up on because we don't have experience with it. The more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. One of the things that has benefited me a lot with Zoom is now we have a family game. About every other week, my family will get together and we'll play games on Zoom. That's a wonderful way to practice it because you kind of get familiar with the tool. The more you use the app, the more familiar you become with it. The other thing is the more you'll learn how to read nonverbal cues, the more you use it, the more you learn how to use those cues. Record it. The benefit of recording it is you can go back and you can read and you can see what you look like. How did I look when I was doing this or doing that or whatever I was doing? What did that look like? Or was I like part of the time, right? You go back and look at it. Record. Was my message mirroring the reaction that the other person on the screen was having? Because you can actually see it. So you kind of want to pick up on some of those things. Use a virtual background from Zoom. I think this is if you need it. But you got to work on it because, and Carmen, we'll use you for an example. I tried the virtual background too. Teresa can tell you I tried it and my afro just looked weird in it. And so I said, that's not working. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on with my head here where the virtual background is not working. You do need to pay attention to your background when you're interviewing because the background sometimes can become more interesting than you are. So you don't want to you don't want to compete with your background. And so like my background here, the reason I was playing around with the virtual before you guys got there, because after a while, people will start asking me about my background. Oh, wow, what's that picture? Are those your son's hands up there? You know, I got specific questions about my background. So, and virtual background just doesn't work for me. What I would do if I were interviewing is I would find another location or I might take down all my pictures. and then play around with people and practice with your friends and ask them what do, and not what interests them. This isn't about what in your background interests them. You don't want anything in your background to interest them. You want this to interest them. So I would make that as blank a canvas as I can. That would be my recommendation there. And then record your, if you can, record your actual Zoom interview. Boy, what a takeaway that is. Think about that. Every time I've looked for a job, I've gotten better and better with each time I interview. My stories got crisper. I got better at how to explain what my strengths were to my interviewers. But now the added benefit is I can critique myself. I'm not going to go back and think about, well, I did good. I think I did good. I can actually look at that and critique it. And I'm not saying get to the place where you pick yourself apart, but at least you can look at it and say, these are the things I did well. Oh man, there's a key message that I wanted to deliver that I got so involved in my conversation that I forgot to mention. And then that takes us to 5. Use a cheat sheet. Man, face-to-face interviews, you can't have your key talking points on a piece of paper, or it's hard to, right? But when you're doing this, you have no idea whether or not I'm checking notes right now. And neither will the interviewer. Every single point that you want to make, you can have jotted down and have it right beside your keyboard. And be able to make sure that you're making those points. Use the mute button. I think you guys know that. Just get familiar with where the mute button is. Because sometimes things happen. We do not have control. It's no different than when you're in a room interview. Here's the thing. Sometimes it throws us off because we're on Zoom. But I don't know about you, but I've been in a lot of conference rooms having an interview, whether I'm the interviewer or the interviewee, and someone accidentally walks in. And then they go, oh, meeting in here, and they leave. Well, the same thing can happen to you. Just reach over and mute. Especially sometimes some crazy stuff goes on. We have people homeschooling. I don't know about, I have a husband that, oh my, all of a sudden he'll start yelling stuff at me, and I'll reach over and mute and go, I'm on the phone, or I'm on this computer, and then go right back. Use a professional profile name. Like mine says Victoria Musa, just use your name, not Donald Duck's little sister or something. And some people do use some really fun names. And I actually don't even use fun names, even though I use Zoom a lot for personal reasons, because I don't want to forget. And then all of a sudden I'm logging on some funny name that's a personal, what I thought was funny. Always start by asking, can you hear me? I didn't do that this time, but I feel like you can hear me because Teresa would have said something. With that, you do have to be careful of headphones, because I do have a headphone that I like to wear because it mutes, it mutes the noise. My husband works from home too. And so I can hear it, but he can't hear it. I like that, but I have to be careful with that because I have one headset that if I have it on, I can't be heard. And so you want to practice those types of things. Don't get a new headset and use it the first time in the interview. Make sure you've practiced with it before. And then close the programs of your computer or your laptop. And I did take a few times to do that. The only thing open on my laptop, I think, is my presentation, because when you open it up sometimes to share the screen, you might show something you don't want to show. And then lastly, take it seriously. That sounds like, of course you take an interview seriously, right? sometimes this thing feels like I'm sitting in front of TV. Like right now, I'm actually scrolling back and forth so I can have some faces to respond to, because it almost becomes like I'm sitting on TV. And then when that happens, I have to do something. Like I have to say, wait a minute, I'm getting a little too comfortable. I'm a little too kicked back. I don't want to look, don't want to look like this, but I also don't want to look like this either when I'm interviewing. I want to be conscious of the fact that I'm not sitting in front of my television, kicked back and relaxed. I'm actually in an interview going after a job that I really, really want. And I'm in the middle of selling myself to a manager that I want to work for. Next question.
Victoria, there was a question about what are some virtual backgrounds that you'd recommend?
I would recommend that you create your own virtual background. You are able to, you can actually take pictures of things, and I can show you some of my virtual backgrounds, but I have to tell you, I chose not to use them. I honestly think that this is, I need to minimize. I don't want to stop sharing, but I need to make it smaller, and I don't know how. There's a way to actually see if I can do that. No, I'm in the sharing mode, so it won't let me do it. It won't let me minimize my screen. But you can actually take a picture of what you want and then download that into the virtual background, and that'll become your background. There's something about my hair that Zoom doesn't like. And so it just makes me look weird. It makes me look, my hair, the outline of my hair actually looks like a cartoon character in the virtual background. It looks like a character. And so I don't like the way that looks. So I would prefer to just clean up my background. There are 4 program backgrounds. And for me, every one of the program background has a problem. There's the water moving. There's one that's like a beach and there's water moving. The other one has this star that seems to be going through everybody's head. I would suggest you go take a picture of a background or maybe a wall with 1 or 2 pictures and then download that into your virtual background. Another question. Okay, well then I tell you what, I'm going to start talking about some things and you guys tell me, and then Teresa will tell me about questions that we're getting. So let me go to the next. That is one thing you can do, is make sure your glasses are so you can see. Some of these things that I'm going to talk about have absolutely, you would think, have absolutely nothing to do with finding a job during a pandemic, but they have a lot to do with finding a job during the pandemic, because I believe that the core to finding a job is really still the same. Maybe some of the apps that we use to interview or how frequently we're, get face-to-face interviews have changed. Maybe the way we network is a little different, but the fact that we do network, the fact that we do have to be able to be of assistance to other people, that's one of the best ways to find jobs, and be able to communicate articulately what we're looking for. Those things to me have not changed. They're the core and the very foundation of what it takes to find a job. And then I'll share one thing that I just believe. I was talking to Teresa about it, and I believe this wholeheartedly because it's been my experience. It is times like this when being over 50, I believe, is an absolute advantage. because I can walk in and tell a hiring manager, I know it's tough, but I've seen some tough times. This might be the toughest one, but I know I can get through it. I know that I can come into a team and I can do this work and stay focused and not lose my focus because there are so many things going on. I am very comfortable with saying change creates opportunity, and I know it does because I haven't been through this change, but I've been through several hard changes in my life. I've been through layoffs. I've been through the loss of family members. I remember when Wang was #1 word processor, and then the computer. I've lived through those things. And I know that just like now, what I have to do is figure out what's important and focus on those things. That's a conversation I can have that a 25-year-old can't have. And I believe that for me, that's a differentiator. It's how do I tell the story around it? So when I'm looking for a job, there are 3 things to consider. And the first thing is a little different. I call them pulling levers. One thing to consider is location. That's a lot less important than it used to be. The other thing is how quickly do you need to find a job? And then lastly is what do you need to get paid? I used to say you absolutely have to give up one of those. You may have to give up one of those things, right? So let's say you're looking for a job and the most important thing is time. Like you need a job within the next 30 days. Then you may have to be willing to give up either money or location. Location actually isn't as important as it used to be because now you can do your job from almost anywhere. But if money is the most important thing and you have time and you don't care where you live, then it may just take a little longer to get the job that pays you the money that you want to do. Now, all of this is making the assumption that it's the kind of work you want to do, right? Questions about that? Or any questions at all? The other thing that I've learned about Zoom is you have to get really comfortable with silence. Because what feels like a long time on Zoom is not as long as you think. Sometimes a silence in Zoom, a 5 or 10 second silence in Zoom feels like 5 minutes, and it actually is not. And so that's the other reason why practicing is important. Because I'm looking at, I think I can only see 2 other people. The rest of the people are boxes with names. And getting comfortable with talking to boxes with names, it does push up your anxiety, or just talking to a one-dimensional face. You have a question, Teresa?
I do. That brings up a question, like on the interviews, it may be a panel of people, not just a one-on-one, right?
Yes, yes.
So sometimes you will be talking to just a name, a black box with a name.
Exactly. And so that's why you want to practice. And some of it is just managing your own mind, for me, like me, but some of it is just managing the anxiety and getting comfortable with that. That's why it's important to have practiced. That's why it's important to know your key messages and use your notes. And you may even want to use some other techniques. Like I have a phone here with a timer going, and when I ask the question, it's clicking off, and I can kind of glance over and see that was only 5 seconds. It felt like more than that, but that was really only 5 seconds. And 5 seconds in a conversation isn't that long. It's like, that's about 5 seconds. Okay, so I need feedback. Is this helping you guys? And then you can ask questions. Is this helping you? I see Carmen nodding. Okay. So then it was, will you have a panel? I have seen panels. In fact, I see more panels, I think. Because in the past, when you were scheduling, a couple of things are happening in the world right now. One is people are more available because they're not spending time driving to and from meetings. And they don't have to have that time that they would pick up, get up from their desk, walk down the hall to the conference room, get Tom and Sue and Karen to come to the room and do the interview, right? A lot of people are sitting at home now. And so it's easier to get those people together. And so for the sake of convenience, you're getting more panel interviews. So yes, you will get panel interviews, and you don't get certain things like eye contact. Where do you look when you're, and the hard thing is really where you should be looking is like right here, where I even like to look here. But if you look here into your camera, then you're looking more into the eyes of the people that you're talking to. One thing that will make it easier is you can actually move, or at least I can move my Zoom box around. So I can move my Zoom box right up under my camera, or right beside some. I believe there are a few computers that have the cameras down at the bottom of the computer, but most of them are at the top of the screen. So I can move my people, the people that I can see. I can move those little boxes up to underneath the my camera, and then it looks more like I'm actually looking the person in the eye as I talk to them. Because that's a part that sometimes is missing, and that's hard when you're the interviewer. So the one thing that you want to do is help your interviewer. And if you move it up, and because we're inclined to look at the picture, but if you move it up to right under the camera, then we are still technically looking at the picture, but it's so much closer to the camera. So it feels so much more like you're looking into the eye of the interviewer when you raise your head, as opposed to, can you tell the difference between there and there?
Yes. And Victoria, this is a good point too, that doesn't come up very often, that when you're on Zoom and somebody shares a screen like you just did, on my computer, it automatically goes to full screen and then you can't move it around. But right at the top, there are some view options. And if you change that to not full screen,
yes,
and you can move it around and depending on who's talking. Because I think that's very important to be able to look at the person in the eye,
it is.
So that's a very good note.
That's why practicing with Zoom is important. And don't be afraid of it. You can't break it. You can get 45 minutes at a time for free. And so I would practice it as much as I possibly can. And I would use it. I mean, right now, I use it to stay connected with family members, to stay connected with clients. Every opportunity I have, I use Zoom because I'm not getting out and getting those face-to-face connections. So after those 3 considerations, this is something that I would tell you to do even if you were doing a face-to-face, and that's like, take an honest look at yourself. What's your story? What's that key thing that you want people to know about you? It's important to be able to tell a story even in a face-to-face interview, but netting out that message and telling that story and being able to grip the person that you're interviewing with is even more important. So you want to have practiced that story and you don't want to stumble around. I hate the thought of this, but I think it's true. I think time will bear it out. But when we're interviewing on Zoom, we're competing with what people see on TV. And on TV, they're used to things being fast-paced and energy, and they're used to a certain thing happening. Even news now, remember, yeah, we're all over 50, I think. So we all remember when people used to sit in front of the news, when those newscasters would sit there with that piece of paper and they were basically talking heads. But even news isn't that way anymore. So the more compelling your story can be, and honestly, the more you can push the screen back a little bit and then you get your hands into it, practice where the camera actually falls on you. And if you can use hand movements, and if you say, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of my story, all of a sudden your story is a little more compelling. You're no longer a talking head. So what can you do? You can definitely nod your head a little bit. You can get your hands up and into the screen as much as you possibly can. And I don't mean like this. There's some hand movements that are crazy, but there are some hand movements like, well, I'm going to make 3 points. Point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. And maybe you do it there, not here, but there. You want to know what your priorities are. And the reason you want to know what your priorities are is because when you're off looking for a job, you want to know what's the most important to you when you're looking for a job. Like, for example, I'm not interested in a full-time job anymore. I have no desire to work 40, 50 hours a week anymore. A day. God, sometimes it felt like it. A week anymore. That's a priority to me. And so when I'm out talking to people, even when I'm looking for a job, I have to be honest. I was coaching a friend on this yesterday. She quit, she retired a couple of years ago, and they called her back and said, we want you to come back as a contractor. And she's like, well, I want to be a contractor and I want the money, but I really only want to do 20 hours a week. I'm not, okay, that's a priority. Be able to talk about that. There's no sense in even looking at a job where they absolutely want you for 40 hours, or you're not going to be able to, my son's planning a wedding. I'm not going to be able to run off and do whatever I want to do with that. Know what your passions are. I help a lot of people all the time leave jobs they don't want because they're diametrically opposed to what they're passionate about. Know your financial situation. If you can't afford to work part-time, then you got to maybe relook at your priorities. Or if you're just working for vacation money and all your other needs are taken care of, then yeah, maybe you can work 20 hours. But knowing these things and making that part of your job search is really important. And I'll go back to this again, and I'm probably going to keep reiterating it. Some of the core things when it comes to looking for a job are the same whether you interview via Zoom or face-to-face. You need to know your priorities. You need to know your passions and how you're going to go about it. You need to know how much money you need to make. And you also need to know how much money you can make. What is your skill set worth? You need to be able to answer the question, do you really want to work? And I kind of put that's my own personal thing. I'll raise my hand right here. That's my own personal thing. I left work at 50. I left corporate America at 57 years old, and I looked and got 3 really good job offers that I would have killed for in the past. And guess what? I passed on every last one of them because I really didn't want to work that hard anymore. So you need to be honest about really, what are you willing to do? And how hard do you want to work? And is this the work you want to do? Are you willing to move? Who can you help? The best way I've ever had at preparing for a job or getting a job has been I really was willing to help people. I do probably as many paid coaching and this kind of things as I do free. I do as many free as paid. I probably do more free because I like being able to help somebody, and because it fuels my passion. If people get work and they're happily focused on working and taking care of their families and accomplishing their personal goals, then I'm successful. And then know your SWOT. And I won't spend a long time on SWOT because I think my time's running out. Okay, I'm going to talk about how to network during COVID, because that might be a big thing. That's bigger than SWOT. So how do you network during COVID? Because you remember back in the day when you used to have coffee with everybody and you just kind of would just, oh, let's connect. I still do that. I just do it differently. And so I would chart the one thing I'm going to do. I'm going to challenge everybody on this little workshop that we're doing. Connect with somebody. Don't leave this experience not connecting with someone, because you can either help them find a job or they can help you find a job. And if we just come to these virtual conferences and we sit and listen and then we go home, I think we don't even go home. We turn it off and go to the other room. I think we miss an opportunity of making a good connection, because our connections are how we find jobs. So connect with somebody today. Put your name, if you're open to it, put your name in your email and chat. I belong to a group. That's one thing we do. It's pretty safe to put your name in your email and chat, or your name in your LinkedIn connection in chat. And then you can connect via LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is your friend. It might be one of your best friends right now, because that's an easy way to connect with people. And guess what? People are more open to connecting with people via Zoom. They really are. They don't have to leave their home. They can make their own coffee. You can limit the time. So stay with free Zoom. I would suggest you, if you don't have a Zoom account, but stay with the free Zoom account and limit your coffees to 30 minutes. And just talk to someone about, hey, I'm looking for a job. Are you looking for a job? Well, tell me what's work. This is what I'm looking for. How can I help you? Oh, you know what? You're interested in that company? I think I have a friend that works at that company. I'll be glad to connect you. It still works. You just got to get out of your comfort zone. I do virtual book clubs. I do virtual meetups. I email, text, and chats now are fair game to reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can I talk to you for 30 minutes? And then I didn't finish this sentence, but I was going to say, start your own self-help group. Every time I've been successful in finding a job, I have gotten a group of job seekers together, and we have all gotten together and met on a weekly basis and talked about our job search and cheered each other on. And we practiced our elevator speeches. It was very structured, because we would ask each other questions like, how many interviews did you go on? How many, how many coffees and connections? How many LinkedIn emails did you send? What have you done to sell yourself? And we held each other accountable to that. And we met on a weekly basis. You can do that via Zoom. Get a group of other people looking for jobs just like you and keep working with each other and helping each other until you find a job. Teresa, how am I on time? Because I think I might be in trouble.
Well, it's about 10 minutes to 11, and usually we go to 11, but
Okay.
might be a good time to again ask any questions. I mean, this is really useful information. I know for me, the networking was a good topic because sometimes I know that I feel just very isolated. You know, I'm alone in my home, except for my husband upstairs, but it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder that we can still do that. What else? Other questions? Well, again, if people want to ask questions, they could put it in the chat box. But what did you say, Victoria? What was the SWOT conversation?
So the SWOT is where you take a good hard look at yourself. And normally SWOT is where you might look at your business or your marketing plan. But a SWOT is where you take a look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so it's where you look at you. So what's helpful to my vision, what's harmful to my vision, but really, what are my strengths? Like what am I bringing to the organization that they are going to need? And then really, what are some of my weaknesses? And they may not necessarily be weaknesses, but what are some of the things? For example, I wasn't willing to work 40 hours a week. So that might make me a little less competitive. Think of it as what might make me a little less competitive. And then, and the reason you want to know these things is you want to know your plan around it. As far as my strengths, I want to sell those. I think I have a strength that I thrive in change. I thrive in adversity. When things, this is given this environment, I believe I'm going to be an asset to an organization. And let me talk to you about how I've done it in the past. I identify my strengths so I can build my stories around it and sell my strengths to the person that's going to hire me. The other strengths would be, for example, if someone was looking for someone in HR and I was selling myself, then I would find out what are those things that they were looking for. Let's say they needed to build a staff or they wanted to grow a staff. And I could talk about, well, let me talk to you about a time when I had to grow the procurement organization at Monsanto. And Monsanto was bleeding money because they were not competitive in their purchasing. And I worked with the leader of the organization. We evaluated the strengths and the opportunities in the organization. We built a vision around that. We built a hiring plan around that. And then I went out and hired 120 folks to build up that organization. And would talk to them. That's a strength of mine. An opportunity might be, I am not willing to move. I'm not. I moved back here and I intend to stay. I know that you're looking for someone to work in Virginia, but let me talk to you about what I can do for you from Austin. I can use Zoom. I have led global teams around the world, so I am able to get employees that don't see me every day aligned and motivated around visions and missions. I have experience with working with people that don't work in the same city or even country that I live in. And so I'm very comfortable with doing that. I am willing to travel so many days a month, but my preference would be that my home base is in Austin. And I believe that I can deliver your hiring plan from Austin. But you got to know those opportunities to craft a story like that around that. And then so internal, external, mostly what I've been talking about are internal strengths and weaknesses, but sometimes there's some external ones too. And external ones to me are ones that have nothing to do with me as a person, but well, one right now, an external threat might be, or weakness might be, travel is really hard. You know, it's really hard to travel right now. But let me talk about how I'm going to stay connected. And let me talk about how I will safely travel. And then I would craft a story around that. Questions? Okay, let's see. I think that's all. I think my final point, if there are no more questions.
Well, Carmen does ask, what is the T in SWOT?
Threat. So it's strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So strengths and weaknesses, those are internal. And then opportunities and threats are external. It is normally a business analysis tool that you would use. But when I need to make a change, or if I need to prepare for something I'm not really ready for, I'll do it on myself. I'll just step back and objectively look at me and say, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And then what are my opportunities and threats? And then I build a plan around it. Because at the end of the day, that's what a job search is. It's basically building a plan to sell myself to a company or a hiring manager.
So it's the messages, it's not just hitting send on an Indeed.com job post saying, I'm interested. There's so much more to it.
That is step one. And actually, I would probably do my SWOT before I press send on an Indeed, because doing my own self-analysis will tell me what jobs I should apply for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost a waste of time to apply for a job not knowing really what I want to, not knowing what I want to do. And I know sometimes we go, well, I just want a job, right? I meant what I said when I said something about, because I like to eat, because I do like to eat. I mean, sometimes it gets down to that, right? We have to put food on the table. We have bills to pay. And we're experiencing a time right now when a lot of people are beginning to struggle with that. So it may get to that. But if you have an option, even if it does get to that, don't you want to know this information first? So you may be willing to take any job you can get, but you still go into it with your eyes wide open if you've done that self-assessment first. And that might be my final point.
That's a good way to end it. So any other last minute questions? Victoria, you've given us a lot to think about, you know, especially at this time where a lot of jobs are uncertain, a lot of people furloughed or looking for something new. And I especially like the SWOT, doing that self-analysis, because so many, from holding these presentations, so many people maybe have been an accountant for years and years, and now they want to do something different. And they don't know exactly what they want to do. And I think that analysis can help them figure it out. It's true.
So I'm on LinkedIn. Anybody want to give me a call? I may not be able to reply like instantly, but if you want to practice on Zoom, or if you got a question, I'm on LinkedIn. You can give me, you can shoot me. I don't know if my phone number is there, but I know my email's there. So shoot me an email. Practice with me. What's that introductory email that you send out when you kind of cold call somebody, right? And you could just say, hey, Victoria, I I saw you in your workshop, and I just have a couple of questions, or can we talk for a few moments? Can I send you a Zoom? And more than likely, you'll get a yes from me. Now, you might get yes, but can we put it off to next week? But generally, I'm confident you will get a yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Victoria.
Utilize your assets. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Check the AustinUP website for more presentations. It's austinup.org. We also have our Aging and Innovation Summit coming up at the end of October, which is very exciting. We have a couple speakers from outside of Austin. One of them, let me get the book here. He has written the book, What Retirees Want. And it's not talking about people who have stopped employing or stopped their career. It's people who have reached maybe the age of 65 or somewhere in their 60s and yet want to do something else. It's similar to what we've been talking about today. So check out the AustinUP website to learn more about our Aging and Innovation Summit. And there are free tickets available, so you don't have to spend anything to get some education. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you, Victoria. Bye-bye.